The Chinese electric vehicle market has turned into a bloodbath. Big promises and bold government subsidies lured hundreds of companies into the race, but now the bubble bursts. Companies are collapsing, prices are crashing, and EV graveyards are popping up everywhere. Why are so many Chinese EV makers on the brink of collapse? In this video, we will see the troubling reality behind the massive EV graveyards and how the crisis could impact car buyers. Keep watching and make sure to subscribe to the channel while you're here. Just a few years ago, this big buzz about all these electric vehicle EV startups was popping up left and right in China. But fast forward to today, and things have taken a bit of a U-turn. Turns out not everyone can be a winner in this game. The market's bursting at the seams, cash is tight, and this ongoing price war is making life even trickier. Now, let's talk about something you don't hear about every day: EV graveyards. Yeah, you heard that right. You've got these massive graveyards scattered across China, filled with rows of abandoned EVs. And they've all got license plates. So, at some point, someone bought these wheels and gave them a home on the road. But now, they're just sitting there gathering dust. Weird? So, what's the deal with these ghost towns of EVs? Well, no one's got a straight answer. Some people reckon there's some shady business going on behind the scenes. See? Most of these abandoned EVs were snapped up by car-sharing companies. But somewhere along the line, things went south, and now these cars are left out in the cold. It's like a real-life mystery we're dealing with here. Now, let's rewind a bit. About 20 years back, the Chinese government was all about pumping billions into new energy vehicles. That's your hybrids, plug-in hybrids, EVs, and hydrogen fuel cell rides. The idea was to kickstart a green revolution in the auto industry. And while it sounded great on paper, we've ended up with more EVs than we know what to do with. As we rolled into the first decade of the 21st century, there was this collective realization in China. If they wanted to catch up with the big Western car manufacturers, they had to go electric. So, the government did what any good government does when it wants something done. It threw more money at it. Startups started popping up like mushrooms after rain, and soon enough, we had a whopping 500 electric vehicle, EV makers on the scene. But let's face it, that was a bit too much, even for the vast Chinese market. Especially when the authorities started tightening the screws on those sweet incentives they were handing out like candy, they had this one big condition: sell a bunch of cars. Sounds simple. Well, not quite. These little startups, bless them, were struggling to move units like it was nobody's business. You see, these companies were getting desperate for those juicy subsidies. So, some people started suspecting there was a bit of a hustle going on. They reckoned these startups were just selling EVs to cash in on the incentives, while the car-sharing companies were hoarding them like they were going out of style. Of course, there are always two sides to a coin. Some people argued that most of these abandoned EVs were relics from the past, ancient models that couldn't hold a candle to the sleek tech of today. They said it was just the natural order of things. Most startups either go belly up or get gobbled up by the big dogs. Also, 2018, China was on a mission to lead the charge in electric vehicles, EVs. It was like the Wild West for startups. The possibilities seemed endless. But let's get real here. Even China's mammoth economy couldn't handle that kind of EV party. Fast forward a bit, and reality hit like a ton of bricks. These companies were excellent at dreaming big. But when it came down to actually churning out cars, they hit a big, fat, money-shaped wall. And just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, along came COVID-19, crashing the party and bringing along its buddy, the economic crisis. Suddenly, it was survival of the fittest. And guess what? About 90% of those EV startups practically vanished into thin air. Yes, you heard that right. Officially, they say there are under 100 still kicking, but experts reckon it's even fewer than that. It's like a game of musical chairs, but instead of seats, it's about fresh capital. But most of these companies couldn't sell enough to cover their coffee bills. Think about it. If you're only moving 500 units every few months, investors aren't exactly lining up at your door, waving wads of cash. That's why it's no surprise that only a handful of these EV hopefuls still hang on for dear life. About 90% of those companies are practically ghosts, haunting the landscape until they officially bite the dust and declare bankruptcy. The writing's on the wall. It's a tough gig being an EV maker. Wildly when you're scrabbling around for sales numbers like loose change in the couch cushions. This recent wave of bankruptcies is like a tsunami crashing down on the dreams of these companies. 5 of them went under in just the past few months. And get this, some were seen as promising players in the game not too long ago. But the struggle is confirmed when trying to elbow your way into a market dominated by the big boys. Speaking of which, it's like the top 10 EV makers are hogging all the sales pie. They're sitting pretty with 80% of the total sales, leaving the little guys to fight over the crumbs. No wonder these startups are dropping like flies. And get this, 1/3 of the remaining companies need to be more by selling less than 2,000 cars a year. It's like trying to run a lemonade stand in the middle of a desert. So yeah, more bankruptcy announcements are on the way. The experts are saying at least 20 more companies are on the chopping block this year. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you see names like Letin, once thought to be the next big thing, going belly up. It's like watching your favorite underdog movie, except nobody's getting the happy ending. Now, do you remember Neutron? Yeah, they went up about 9 years back, joining the bankruptcy party and Evergrande New Energy Auto, a big shot in a Chinese conglomerate. They poured billions into the EV dream, but couldn't sell enough cars to cover the cost of a cup of coffee, let alone turn a profit. They were bleeding $17 million on every EV they sold. Then there's WM, the fresh-faced startup with pockets deeper than the Mariana Trench, showing a cool $5.3 billion in capital. But despite all the fancy tech they cooked up, they couldn't handle the heat in the price war. They're in the middle of a major makeover, hunting for investors like a desperate contestant on a reality show. But let's face it, their chances of finding a sugar daddy are slimmer than a chopstick. Even the big shots are sweating bullets in the cutthroat world of Chinese EVs. The top dogs in the industry are brawling like alley cats over a fishbone. Turns out, making a buck on EVs ain't as easy as pie, even if you're pumping them out like there's no tomorrow. BYD is the Lone Ranger turning a profit in this EV rodeo, while the rest are left scratching their heads, wondering where it all went wrong. Tesla's chilling at the winner's table too, but they've always been the golden child of the EV world. Despite the government throwing incentives like confetti and labor costs lower than a limbo bar, these companies are bleeding money faster than a busted fire hydrant. Take NIO, for instance. They've got swanky production facilities and a workforce that could populate a small town, but their sales are about as lively as a sloth on a Sunday afternoon. Selling a measly 8,000 cars last year, they're coughing up $35,000 loss on each electric vehicle. So what's NIO's game plan? Well, they're hitting up pockets around the globe for cash injections, including cozying up to Abu Dhabi for a 7% stake. And they're not alone in the struggle. Even the big boys of Chinese car making are feeling the heat in the EV kitchen. The only silver lining for them is that they've got the chops to go toe-to-toe internationally. But hey, it's tough out there, even for the big fish. But the real reason behind this EV graveyard shift is the domestic market squeeze. China might be the land of opportunity, but it's not exactly teeming with fat wallets. Most people there are pinching pennies, which means EV makers are stuck peddling pint-sized, budget-friendly rides. Sure, they might turn a profit, but it's like trying to squeeze water from a stone. Only a handful of companies can ride out this price war storm, while the rest are left drowning in debt or swallowed up by the big boys. Let's wrap it up now. But before that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on the video in the comment section below. See you in the next video.